Hello once again, and welcome into this edition of Maroon and Bold. I'm your sports editor, Austin Chastain for Central Michigan Life, and here on Zoom, I guess, alongside Christian Booher and Andy Loveland, two of our staff reporters. Gentlemen, how are things going for you guys? Are you guys maintaining some kind of sanity?
Oh, yeah. I think that things are going well. Obviously, we're getting kind of cabin fever at this point. We're about a month in to the quarantine, but it was refreshing to have something that resembles live sports on last night in the Michael Jordan documentary. And so it was cool to see people live tweeting sports again, firing off hot takes. It almost felt like we were back to normal.
Right. Absolutely. Andy, how about you, man?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. Friday, WNBA draft, I gave that a look for a little bit. And then last night, The Last Dance. So it was the first time I think I'd watched any sporting event live. I mean, I'd kept up with some of the stuff they'd done on Twitter mostly because I don't do a whole bunch of the Twitch stuff. But it was nice. And I got to say, I think I'm ready for next weekend. But we'll have more stuff here. The NFL draft is coming up, and I think that's what we're about to hear.
Absolutely. NFL draft's coming up this week, and that's what this episode is surrounded around. Obviously it's one of the few live sporting events coming up here amid the coronavirus quarantine and pandemic and everything going on. As you can see, I'm in a makeshift version of Kelly Short Stadium. An Isaac Ritchie original photo for whatever that's worth, and Andy is down in the Brown Stadium at the moment.
Energy.
What is it? First Energy Stadium, right? That's right. So, guys, let's get right into it. NFL, like I said, NFL draft starts this week on Thursday, Friday. Thursday night. That's right. My brain so disconnected, but guys, kind of looking at it, who are your guys' top three picks overall, and kind of give some reasoning. Why do you guys think those respective guys belong in those spots?
I think you got to start at top with Burrow, Joe Burrow, the quarterback out of LSU. The things he's done in the 2 years there down in the Bayou, I think he could come in and turn a franchise around, especially a franchise like the Bengals, who, they thought they struck gold with Andy Dalton, and then things kind of got turned on their head. And so I think it's time for them to start over and take a quarterback there. It's hard to believe that he was somebody's backup at Ohio State. Moving forward, I think the Redskins, Washington, a lot of talk that they might try to take Tua. I don't think so. I think it'll be Chase Young, and then maybe the Lions trade out at 3, but I think they've got Jeff Okudah zeroed in on wherever they decide to take him, whether it's at 3 or whether they decide to trade back.
Absolutely. Andy, who are your top 3? Is it any different than Christian's, or what's your list look like?
Yeah, so I think I've got Burrow 1 like everyone else. I think it'd be the biggest surprise of the entire year if Burrow didn't go 1. And then I know Ron Rivera, and there's a lot of stuff, like he said, about them taking Tua. They're not stupid. Chase Young's a better player and will be a better player than Joe Burrow. So they'll have Chase Young immediately. That's a no-brainer. I think the Lions, Okudah is a player I think that's very much in play for them. But I think the more you watch tape of Isaiah Simmons, that's a Matt Patricia player right there.
Yeah.
Patricia will pass up a guy like Simmons who can play. I mean, he played 6 different positions last year on defense, over 120 snaps. So I know they'd like to replace Slay, but Simmons is going to be too tempting, I think.
Right on. I'm going to be lame. My list looks exactly like Christian's. I've got Joe Burrow going number 1. What he was able to do at LSU last year was just downright impressive. I mean, he was able to take control of a team that. Well, he was able to take control of that offense and lead it through a really tough SEC schedule and all the way, and I mean, dominated almost every game that they played last year. They dominated that college football playoff semifinal against Oklahoma, and then dominated the second half against Clemson. in the national championship game. So seeing Joe Burrow and what he was able to do, no doubt number one. I think he's going to be a great refresher for Cincinnati. Again, Chase Young at number 2 for the Redskins. His prowess is just scary. He's a frightening defensive end, and he's going to be great too for the Redskins. And then I like Jeff Okudah going number 3 for the Lions. Not much really to say there. Christian pretty much tackled that, but yeah, he's going to be a really interesting pickup for the Lions. You guys both mentioned it. Tua Tagovailoa. Not sure where he's going to go. Not sure how healthy he is. That kind of thing. Just kind of get your guys' opinion on him real quick. Where do you think he might end up? Where do is he going to end up? Not with the Redskins. Where do you guys think he's going to end up when this is all over?
There's been talk about either LA or Miami moving up to 3 to try and jump the other team to get him. And I think that while that's a pretty solid possibility, given the Lions general manager track record, I don't think anybody's scared of Detroit taking him at 3. So, and then New York obviously at 4. They took their future quarterback last season, and then Miami at 5 and Los Angeles at 6. And so I certainly think that one of those 2 teams will get him and take a chance on him, because I think that what you've seen at Alabama is a good enough sample size to where if he is healthy, he can merit the risk of taking him and the injuries that he's had. And so I think that my guess would be Miami at 5. But if they don't take him, Los Angeles will certainly get him at 6.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. I think Miami is a good place. I mean, there's been a lot of buzz lately about them with Herbert, so we'll see what that really means for them. Otherwise, I think don't be afraid to see somebody else. I mean, the Raiders have a lot of draft capital, and I don't know how confident they are in Derek Carr. So we'll see. I mean, is that a trade the Lions can make? Because that's where you'd need to go if you're another team that wants to get to it. You'd have to go up to 3 with Detroit, and I think Detroit is, for whatever reason, eager to get out of that pick. A team with not a lot of, depth of talent on their team, and they're really, really eager to just get a lot of players quickly. So,
yeah, I'm right there with you guys. I mean, and I could see him going to the Chargers and replacing Phillip Rivers. I could also see him going to the Dolphins because they need pretty much all the help they can get at the quarterback position. So either way, I mean, the Chargers are either going to get Tua or Justin Herbert, and the Dolphins are going to get Tua or Justin Herbert. So it's going to be that quarterback position for both of those teams is going to be filled up pretty nicely, depending on who they get, no matter who they get. But yeah, those are definitely 2 guys to keep an eye out for, Tua and Justin Herbert coming out of Oregon. All right, guys. Also want to take a look. You'll kind of find that the theme of this is we're going to go from broad to focused to ultra focused. But we'll go to that kind of focused area now with who are your top 3 guys in the state of Michigan that could come out and make some noise? Not just in the draft, but once the season, once the NFL season rolls around.
I think you got to go up front with Michigan, the University of Michigan, with 2 guys. Cesar Ruiz, their center, and then Ben Bredesen, a guard. Both of those guys were like anchors, up front for the Wolverines. They were mainstays. John Runyon's another guy that's probably going to go a little bit later, but he was another guy on that offensive line where, they're just rock solid up front. The quarterback play wasn't great, and so that's why they kind of faltered. But the offensive line for Michigan, all those guys have future at the next level. Also, Donovan Peoples-Jones was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He's one of the top receivers in the country. something didn't go well for him at Michigan. Obviously, we don't know if it was the quarterback play or if maybe he's just a guy with a ton of athletic ability, but maybe needs a little bit more fine-tuning on the skill side. Did well at the combine, showed out well at the combine, good vertical, good 40, good shuttle time. But it's going to be really interesting to see if he can get in the right scheme and really show off some of that potential at the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I agree full-heartedly with that. I think that offensive lineman for Michigan, they're Big Ten offensive linemen. So the Big Ten has a history of putting out good offensive linemen. I mean, you look at Joe Thomas, and you've got guys up until now that are awesome from the Big Ten. So I think that's where you look first, just because Michigan, since Harbaugh has taken over, has had a lot of success, but their skill position players haven't panned out the way they thought they would. You know, you bring in a guy like Shea Patterson from Ole Miss, who was a 5-star quarterback coming out of high school and who's never materialized in anything really at the college level. So I don't think he's going to do much. Donovan Peoples-Jones is an interesting one because I think he is a name where he might not go until round 4, but if he gets in the right spot, the way Christian was saying, I think he could have an immediate impact where, you know, suddenly he's, you know, one of the top rookie receivers in the game. And I think he would be talked about higher if this receiving class wasn't absolutely loaded. I mean, it's not his fault he's a 4th-round pick at this point. We're talking 3, 4, 5 guys might go in the first round. So,
right. Where do you think would be one of those spots if Peoples-Jones were to land that he could excel? I'd be either him being drafted or maybe even signing another kind of deal.
I think looking at Peoples-Jones, I think one of the places where he could really fit in well would be if he were able to get into a wide open scheme. Baltimore comes to mind. You know, they have such a premium on speed over there with the Ravens, with Lamar Jackson obviously at quarterback, and then you guys got guys like Hollywood Brown who can just take the top off of defenses at any given minute with their speed. So I think if you were to get into a scheme like that, maybe even a place like New Orleans with an experienced quarterback, and you got a guy like Michael Thomas who's a bona fide number 1. You learn the ropes from guys like that, and I think that would be really beneficial for him because, like I said, the athletic ability is there for him. It's just a matter of can he get it fine-tuned. Had a little bit of an issue with his hands at points in his career, and if you get him learning from a guy like Michael Thomas or Julio Jones in Atlanta, he could be dangerous.
Andy, what are your thoughts?
yeah, I think Atlanta is probably too crowded right now for Peoples-Jones with Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, and it doesn't look like either of those guys are going anywhere anytime soon. Immediately, I think of a place like Arizona, who, you know, you've got DeAndre Hopkins, but you got a young Kyler Murray, and you've got Cliff Kingsbury, who really wants to spread the ball out, air it out, and, you know, do some different things. Again, I agree with the Saints. Maybe one of those places like LA or Miami, who are taking a young quarterback and need later picks to be players who can step up in ways that maybe they aren't expected to right away in the draft. So, I mean, maybe he gets paired with like a Tua or a Justin Herbert in Miami, and they kind of learn together. And, you know, it's a 2 to 3 year process before we're saying, you know, either of those guys are a household name, but now they are. But yeah, I think he's got ability, but I think, yeah, those are the spots I see immediately where he could have some kind of impact, at least down the road.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, I like that kind of what Christian was saying, that kind of wide open scheme, like that high-powered offense, like what Arizona likes to run with Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury and all those guys. Yeah, I mean, he could have a lot of success if he's, like Andy said, if he's able to hit that right spot, if he's able to find the right team and find that right scheme, then I think he'll do great things. You know, just for whatever it's worth. I mean, I'm just gonna kind of throw out a couple of picks from the state that come to my mind. Donovan Peoples-Jones is one of them, so we'll skip that. Cody White from Michigan State, looking like a late round pick, maybe even going undrafted, and Levante Bellamy from Western Michigan. Set all kinds of records down there in Kalamazoo. I know this is a CMU show, but we're talking about the state here. What are your guys' thoughts? It seems a little random, I know, on Cody White and Levante Bellamy. Are those guys, are they threats to be mid to late round picks, or do you think both those guys maybe go undrafted?
With Cody White, I think that similarly to Donovan Peoples-Jones over at Michigan, I think quarterback play might have been an issue there. Obviously, although Brian Lewerke started out, he had a couple of pretty good years, and I think his production tailed off there towards the end, which I think has taken him off of a lot of draft boards, and maybe is the reason why we're not talking about him right now as opposed to Cody White. Cody White's a good athlete. He's made some pretty good catches over there. He's got all the talent in the world. It's just like Andy said earlier, it's a loaded receiving class. I think that if he isn't drafted, he's got a really good shot to stick with a team on a UDFA contract, and he's going to make a team pretty happy if he can get in the right system. And as far as Levante Bellamy, man, the dude's got all the speed in the world. He's fast, which obviously is huge at the running back position. A little bit undersized, but what he lacks in size, he makes up for with strength. And so I think that there will be a team in the later rounds that maybe has a pretty solid starting running back that maybe takes a flyer on him in case something happens to a starter and you need him in a pinch for 3 or 4 games.
Yeah, I think for White, we'll see. He ran a terrible 40 time at the combine, so that doesn't help. That's going to put him out of a lot of things, because usually if you don't have tape, if you've got good numbers, you're more likely to climb up boards. But he doesn't have that, so we'll see where he can land and what he can kind of work with. Because, there's stories out there. You think of Adam Thielen and other guys who were undrafted from, even smaller schools than Michigan State. So, there's the opportunity there, again, if you just get the right fit. And then same thing for Bellamy. The problem with both of these positions right now is you kind of see – you look at a player like Brandon Cooks has been traded 3 times in the last 3 years, and we saw it happen with Melvin Gordon and Le'Veon Bell. So both of these positions are undervalued. So they're less likely to take a late-round flyer on a guy when I could, try and get an edge rusher or a cornerback or somebody else who's going to pan out, and then just pick these guys up undrafted. And if they don't work, kind of just toss them the curb, because analytics just doesn't say you need stars at these positions anymore.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. There has been a lot of change with those 2 particular positions, and wide receiver and running back. And yeah, it seems like anybody that gets drafted in those positions can break out, even if it's not a name that necessarily you hear of a bunch while they're in college. Once they get to the NFL, it's kind of everybody can do their own thing, and everybody has kind of done their own thing for the last couple of years, which makes those positions, starting in those positions, kind of difficult to find, difficult to be able to pick that up right out of the draft or on a undrafted free agent contract kind of thing. Makes it kind of interesting. Real quick, we're going to be talking with Ben Raven, who covers the Lions for MLive. Just real quick, what are you guys expecting from the Lions this in the draft coming up later this week?
I think that they're going to try to trade out a 3 like we've talked about. Whether or not that happens, I'm not so sold that it does, just because I don't see anybody moving up that far to take Tua. But, it is draft night. Crazier things have happened. I think that obviously they go defense in round 1. And then, in the middle rounds, they try to get a skill guy or 2 and beef up the offensive line. And everything I've been reading points to, either an edge rusher or a running back or a receiver in the middle rounds 2 through about 4 or 5. And then in the late rounds, you're just hoping to get a steal maybe somebody falls a little bit further than they should. And, this is do or die for Bob Quinn and company, according to everything we've heard, with it being win now or bust. And so they're going to be going all out, and I'm excited to see what they can get and what it translates to on the field.
Yeah, I'd say absolutely. I think you'd expect – I think defense first round, second round if they can get it. I think there's a lot of buzz around all right, I'm blanking on the name. Antoine Winfield Jr.
Yes.
There's a lot of buzz around him, and that's somebody I think a lot of teams are aiming for second round, but now there's buzz that he might crawl up as far as mid first round. I don't know. Another name is can they get J.K. Dobbins early in the second round? Not that they need a running back, but Kerryon Johnson hasn't proven that he can stay healthy. But I think you're ultimately looking at the Lions, and they're missing a lot of defensive pieces. So it is, win an hour bust for Quinn and Patricia. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're drafting a ton of players who maybe don't project out as the best, but can play tomorrow. Like Isaiah Simmons can play tomorrow. Will he be as impactful in the future as Okudah? I don't know, but he'll be ready tomorrow. Winfield, you've got a bunch of other defensive players throughout the draft. And then maybe later down, a guy like Chase Claypool, can he help Matthew Stafford? So I think they've got the problem for the Lions is they've got to win now, but they also have a lot of holes. That's how you're picking 3.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I'm right there. I'm right there with you guys. Absolutely. Now moving on, the ultra focused part of the show that I mentioned before, talking Central Michigan. First, I want to take just a quick look back. I'm not sure how well you can see. It's whatever. On the video board here in Kelly Short Stadium, Eric Fisher is on the board as one of the former Chippewas in the NFL. Obviously, he's the only number 1 draft pick in conference history and CMU history. But in recent years, CMU has seen a couple guys go into the NFL. Sean Murphy-Bunting and Xavier Crawford come to mind as they went in last year and had pretty successful rookie campaigns, especially Sean Bunting, able to do a lot of great things. What do you guys make of the seniors and the guys going into the draft this year from Central Michigan? There were 3 guys that come to mind for us, at least for me, Jonathan Ward, Quan Jamison, and Sean Adesanya. Those 3 guys, what do those guys bring? What can they bring to an NFL team? And ultimately, do you think they land somewhere?
Starting offensively with Jonathan Ward, I think Jonathan Ward's biggest asset is the fact that he can make an impact not only running the ball but also catching. Not a great pass protector, which kind of limits his value, but very, very multi-dimensional. You can line him up in the slot. You can line him up out wide. And he can make plays in space, which is, like Andy said, though, there's kind of been a premium placed on running backs and wide receivers. They're a little bit undervalued, which kind of limits whether or not he can get drafted or not. Obviously, he's going to make a team happy if everything pans out. He's got big hands, which helps, with carrying the football. But on the same coin, he struggled with fumbles at times. Coming to mind that game that's being shot in your background there, Austin. That was the opening night game against Albany where he fumbled twice. So there's been the struggles with ball control. As far as Sean Adesanya and Quan Jamison, both of those guys were talented defenders for the Chippewas. I'm just not so sure if they can stand out not having a pro day or getting combine invites to the point where a team will draft them. Yeah,
I think the biggest thing here for Central Michigan is just players like that are who are hit most by this quarantine. I mean, no pro day. They obviously didn't get combine invites. They couldn't get draft workouts. So these unknown players who maybe have some tape, I think of Jameson, there's probably some tape out there that a defensive coach is looking at saying like, okay, this kid can do some things, but how fast is he actually? And how good is his technique? And you can't necessarily look at those things up close. So I think that's where they're going to struggle this year. It's unfortunate. I think in years past, I'd almost say, especially with Jameson, no doubt he could at least get a combine invite or a training camp invite, and then we'll see how he can turn that. Same thing with Adesanya. He's got some tape where you're thinking like, okay, that's a basis we can work. How is everything else? Like what's teachable and what's not? But with no hands-on before the draft, I'd be shocked if they went at all. Ward is another thing where he just missed a combine invite somehow. I'm not sure how he didn't at least get an invite. But, yeah, the biggest problem for him is fumbles. I mean, I think of the homecoming game where he broke off a pretty big run, fought for extra yards, gets to the goal line, and then fumbles, and there's a lot of those plays where, like, it's half of it is the good Jonathan Ward, and then half of it is, where demons come out as far as, like, fumbling and stuff like that. And I think another problem for Ward is he wasn't a 4-year producer. You look, there's 1,000 yards multiple times, but also there's a gap in the middle where he didn't reach 1,000. And I think that's another thing where, like, when you're looking at small schools, typically those players that get drafted, in the 3rd, 4th round have been, like, historically high producers in their conference consistently, but I think there's pedigree with Central Michigan, obviously with Fisher, and Bunting might have been the best defensive back drafted last year from anywhere. So I think there's pedigree there where there's a chance that just from being from Central Michigan that those guys will at least get looks whenever this is all over.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, I will third that Jonathan Ward's, his one glaring fault that he has is his turnovers. I mean, you guys, I'm just beating a dead horse at this point, but the one game that comes to mind for me is the Western Michigan game on that first drive. Runs up the left side and fumbles, and that turned the momentum of that game and got it started off pretty poorly for CMU, and they ended up losing. But I think there's a lot of good. I'm with Andy on here. I don't understand quite how he didn't get that combine invite, and then everything that has transpired with the quarantine is without having a pro day. I mean, I think I disagree with the fact that with him not getting a combine invite. I think Jonathan Ward should have been there, and I think he would have performed pretty well, honestly. And I feel like he's kind of almost been slighted his entire career. I mean, he finished 3rd team All MAC this year when, I mean, he was one of the leaders throughout. And he was one of the leaders throughout the year. I mean, he missed a couple of games with a shoulder injury, and he still ran for over 1,200 yards. So, I mean, I would argue he's at least 2nd team. But I get it. And to Andy's point of, guys in the conference that dominate getting late round looks. I mean, look at Levante Bellamy. We're questioning whether he gets drafted, 3rd, 4th, maybe even the 5th round, maybe even not at all. And he set all kinds of records at Western. So that's just kind of that same. Andy's right. Ward's junior year, that 2018 season. I mean, he struggled mightily. I think he only played in 9 games that year, and he just couldn't quite find a rhythm. And it was. I mean, he just struggled. His sophomore year, that 2017 season. I mean, he played great. He was a catalyst for that offense. Same thing in 2019. He and Kobe Lewis. I mean, I know we're not talking about the team right now, but I mean that tandem was able to feed off of each other. Those two guys really took care of business. Daquan Jamison, I think he had a couple of different he showed a lot of what he can do and what he can bring to teams, but that the secondary as a whole for CMU last year was kind of had some spots in it that had some weak spots in it. Not saying Jamison was one of those, but if you look as a whole, that secondary had a couple of different weak spots. I think Jamison was one of those strong spots to kind of help bolster the secondary as the season went along. He had two interceptions, I think almost in consecutive drives against Bowling Green. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he helped seal that game away as well. And Sean Adesanya, I think he was a little bit underwhelming this year, but I think he still showed a lot. Do I think he gets drafted? I don't think so, but I could see him getting a training camp invite, something like that, and kind of, I don't know. If he doesn't quite make it in the NFL, I could see him maybe going to the CFL or something along those lines, a secondary league, and having a lot of success over there as well. Still kind of having that dream of playing professional football, and I think any of those three guys, I think those guys could go to maybe a secondary league, prove themselves, and maybe end up in the NFL or thrive really strongly in one of those leagues. So,
yeah, we'll see with all those guys. I think not having eyes on even Bellamy and Western and stuff like that, those MAC guys really, I think, get a boost from pro days, combine invites, and a lot of that. And having none of that stuff really hurts chances for a lot of guys in the conference to either get drafted or to, in like Bellamy's case, like you said, like move up the board. Now he might be a 7th round pick, but how far could he have moved up? I think of a guy like Murphy Bunting last year, who at the end of the season was, a late round pick, but then as people saw different tape and different workouts and combine stuff, he moved up where he was, only the second cornerback, or he was the first cornerback taken off the board. So,
yeah, he shot right up the draft boards thanks to like pro day and the combine, which is something that these guys don't get. A couple of names that stick out from CMU's roster: Oge Udeku. I don't know if he gets drafted because, obviously, once again, no pro day or anything like that. But good size. He's a strong dude. I think that he could stick if he gets into a training camp. And obviously the Quentin Dormady, the 1 year he had here, he won't get drafted. He may be a camp arm. You hear talk of the guys that get brought in to throw a couple of corner routes. I just don't see him sticking either. He struggled a little bit with injuries throughout his college career and really just didn't. I don't think he put up the numbers at Central Michigan to warrant that extra look that a team may give him. So those are just a couple other guys. But even guys like Dan Lefevre, who back when they were at Central Michigan, they were dynamite for 4 years, and they get drafted and it just doesn't pan out. You got a guy like Kavon Frazier, who Daquan Jamison reminds me a lot of, and they've been working out together in preparation for all this, where you get drafted in the 6th or 7th round or don't get drafted at all, but you turn enough heads in camp to the point where you make it to the preseason, and then you make some plays in special teams in the preseason, and just like that, you're on the 53-man roster going into year one, and your name's out there. So it's just a matter of, can you produce when the time comes? And unfortunately for these guys, they haven't had as many opportunities as they would in any other year.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. With Frazier and Murphy Bunting, those two and Jamison are all really close. Our guy Evan Petzold wrote a really cool story about Jamison and the relationship that he has with both Frazier and Murphy Bunting. And Jamison's been able to follow those guys' examples at CMU and improve year in and year out, and throughout his career, he's been able to show a lot of what he can do and what, like I said earlier, like what he brings to any team, not just CMU, not just an NFL team, but to anybody. And if somebody maybe wants to take a chance, I think they could be pretty happy with what they're going to get from Daquan Jamison, and like I said, he could be wildly successful in the NFL if those things pan out the right way, and someone could go in the second round. Someone like Christian said, someone can go in the second round and be a complete bust and not have it work out. So you just never know. That's both the beauty and I guess the frightening part of the NFL draft is you have no idea what's going to happen, and you take a chance, put a lot of stake in one person, they don't end up being exactly what you're hoping for. It's not exactly perfect in terms of I guess what you're looking for.
One question I want to pose to you guys, looking at the future, who are some guys that maybe next year or the following year could we be sitting here at this time next year or 2 years from now talking about maybe if they have a better chance than some of these guys do? Obviously, they would probably get a look at a combine. What comes to my mind is guys like Khalil Pimpleton, Kobe Lewis, and Troy Brown are three guys that I think next year or the year after, obviously all three are heading into their junior seasons, and I don't know if they can jump off enough draft boards. I think if there's one guy who's got a chance to be an early departure, it's Pimpleton, because the dude is a game breaker. He can make plays in special teams. We've seen him run back punts that have been called back, obviously, but he can catch, he can run, and he's even been able to throw it a couple times, being a former high school quarterback. So I think he could, not to look too far ahead, but he could jump ship after the year if he has a big enough year. And obviously it all depends on who's playing quarterback. But back to the future draft prospects, who are some guys, and if you agree with me, who are some guys who could be, players in the future from this Central Michigan team?
I totally agree with you. I think Pimpleton is – I don't know if he's going to jump ship, if he's going to be able to leave early. I just don't think so. I do think that he is going to be a guy that gets serious looks from NFL teams. He is undersized. Mm-hmm. That is not a secret. I think he's even referred to it a few times himself. But he is one of those guys that, like Christian said, he completely changes the game. He had a punt, like Christian said, that was called back, and it was the first punt return for a touchdown in a decade since Antonio Brown took one back in 2009. For whatever it's worth, I think Pimpleton does take one back in 2020. When and if they're able to play in 2020, right. But I think Pimpleton takes care of that. Troy Brown, I agree. He is a guy that's going to get looks. I think he does need to prove a little bit more.
Yes.
He has that big time ability, and I think he's been able to learn a lot from guys that came before him. Briones comes to mind.
Oliver.
Michael Oliver, thank you. Michael Oliver.
And Malik Fountain, too.
That was I apologize to whoever might be listening. That was a name I could not think of. It was right on the tip of my tongue. But, yes, Malik Fountain and Michael Oliver last year, who's a very quiet leader, but still he's, again, more of a leader by example. But Michael Oliver definitely was able to give some wisdom to the linebackers now. I don't know. And I apologize. What was the Kobe Lewis, right? That was the third name you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's kind of a guy like Jonathan Ward that he doesn't turn the ball over very much. But if he can find a way to kind of knock some guys around a little bit more, kind of like what Jonathan Ward can do, then he's definitely going to get some big time looks. Maybe even after next year from some NFL teams, and then definitely if he can bring that to his senior year as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that same thing. I mean, Pimpleton, I don't think he leaves after next season just because he's undersized, so that's going to hurt draft value anyway. And with less than 1,000 yards this year, he would need probably like 1,600 or 1,800 all-purpose yards to really justify and to move far enough up draft boards where I think anyone would think it's reasonable. But, I mean, there's a spot for a guy like that who can maybe – play wildcat quarterback or play slot receiver and be in the backfield as a running back who can do a lot of different things as well as return punts and kicks. So I think he's got an opportunity there, and we'll see what the tape shows here to kind of move that along. Same thing with Kobe Lewis. I mean, he's a good sized running back similar to Ward, but he has that same issue where he fumbled a handful of times this year.
Yes, Ball State.
In spots where you're like, okay, you just had a really good run and now you're fumbling it. So can he erase some of those? And I think Troy Brown might be the biggest surprise of this because and Austin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought he came into Central Michigan as a safety.
Yes, he came down from safety.
Switched to linebacker, and really in 1 year as a starting linebacker made, I think, dramatic improvements and learned the position fairly well. I mean, there's a lot of room to grow, but for playing linebacker for a season, I think he's got potential. And you look at, he had 91 tackles and handful of interceptions. I want to say 3 interceptions and a couple of pass breakups. Those are pretty good stats, for a linebacker in the pass. So I think he's a name that, as the years go on, after next year and into his senior season could maybe, really start to build up some momentum to, impress a few people and at least, get a combine invite along with some of that other stuff to prove that he belongs.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Chris, that was a great thought there, my man. Yeah, so guys, kind of just wrapping it up here. What are some of your guys' final thoughts on everything that we talked about? It could be draft as a whole, CMU picks. What are some of your guys' final thoughts?
I mean, it makes me miss football. It's exciting to get out here and chat a little bit about it. It makes me excited for the future of the Chippewas because you're speculating on guys that are already gone, but what's to come with these guys? A guy like Troy Brown who comes in as a taller safety, puts a little bit of muscle on, and there's a place for a linebacker who can come out of the backfield and cover running back in the Mid-American Conference, given that everything's so wide open. And so it's exciting to think about what guys like that can be going forward. And it's pretty cool to think that 365 days from now, we're going to be sitting here talking about the next batch of Chippewas and what they did this year, assuming there is this season per se.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think the biggest question mark looking forward is who plays quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Like who plays quarterback, not just next season. I mean, there's a whole lot up in the air there, but going forward, for Jim McElwain and company. But I think on the positive side of things, I think Khalil Pimpleton is going to be used even more than he was last season. I mean, Evan wrote that, a mailbag article, and even, some hints he might play quarterback a handful of times. So, I mean, what is Pimpleton and, what is Jim McElwain and, Charlie Fry going to draw up for Pimpleton that really show off his explosiveness and some of the things he can do aside from, just catch the ball. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun to see as he progresses and gets, I guess, used to the offense, because that was also his first year here. He didn't play here. He didn't originally come here. So I think that the more he gets used to McElwain and what they're trying to do, I think we can expect big things from him. And that's exciting looking forward, because CMU hasn't had that in the last couple of years. I mean, you think of the last exciting kind of receiving core, and it was really led by a tight end in Conklin. So,
yeah,
and that was still 3 or 4 years ago at this point.
I mean, absolutely. And to kind of cement that point, I mean, there is a lot of uncertainty at the quarterback position for CMU this year. So using Pimpleton as that wildcat, kind of like what they did with Tommy Lazzaro last year.
Yeah.
That I mean that system worked really, really well. It saved CMU so many times. They get into a third and decent, third and medium, I guess, and you just give the ball to Lazaro and just let him run. Or he even threw I think he threw 2 passes last year, something like that. And yeah, I mean that system kind of came out to be a little bit later in the year, but it's still. I think if you have a system like that from the very get go, you might be able to find a lot of success. And this game behind me, the Albany game comes to mind. The offense had times of explosion and sometimes that it stalled out. And I think if you have that same 2 quarterback system, you might have a little bit more success against a team and be able to kind of dominate a team and put them away a little bit quicker. But it's definitely exciting to be talking about football once again. It just seems very weird because it's like, oh yeah, I'm so excited about football, and obviously I'll be the one to kind of burst the bubble here. Christian already kind of put it too, but I'm going to completely burst the bubble. We don't know if there's going to be football played in September like scheduled. I'm hearing rumblings that the season might be started later. They might even be able to start it right on time, but it just depends on whether or not college campuses open back up and are ready for the school year. Because if they're not, then the commissioners don't want to play. So you could see maybe even a spring football season, which would just be completely bizarre. I don't think we would ever see something like it again. That could have ramifications for years and years and years, and it just could get ugly. It could get really messy, or everything could just go away and we can get back to whatever normal looks like for the rest of us. But, guys, thank you guys so much for joining us. Well, I'll be back in just a couple minutes to talk with Ben Raven from MLive about the Detroit Lions and their NFL draft expectations. Welcome back. I'm joined by Benjamin Raven of the Lions beat reporter for MLive. He's a CMU grad and a Grand Central Magazine alum. Benjamin, how are you doing? Amid the whole coronavirus pandemic, are you doing well, keeping some kind of sanity?
Yeah, doing well. I pretty much haven't been out of my house since the combine down in Indianapolis, so starting to go a little crazy, but luckily free agency and the draft have kept me busy, so not too many complaints there. I know it's been a lot harder on other people in my shoes.
Right, fair enough. And well, I want to say thank you for taking some time out of your busy, hectically busy week.
Yeah.
Call it that. The NFL draft coming up this weekend. We'll just jump right into it. Lions have the number 3 pick. I've been hearing some rumblings of a lot of mock drafts and stuff like that have Jeff Okudah from Ohio State as the guy that the Lions are going to pick at number 3. How realistic, or I guess, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think he's going to be the guy? Do you maybe think the Lions might make a move, maybe trade away that 3rd pick for something else down the line? Or
I think their top option. They want to move back. They want to add a couple assets, but I do think Okudah is at the top of their board, outside of Chase Young, because that's the big thing there. If Washington changes everything up and doesn't take Chase Young, I think the Lions stay there. They take Young, but if Young is off the board, I think they're doing everything in their power to trade back because they think they can get Okudah at 5, 6, or even 7, maybe.
Okay, and I guess in that first round, who are some of the guys that they might also be looking at as some of those assets to fill some of the holes, some of the other roles that they have.
Yeah.
Some of the needs.
Yeah, some first-round options outside of it's Young and then Okuda, and then I think it goes Isaiah Simmons right behind those two, and then I think it's Derek Brown, and then as crazy it is, I think it's Tua's their fifth option right there. I mean, just by default, I don't see it as a possibility. I've never bought into it, but those are kind of like when we talk about the 5 most likely picks, it goes Young, Okuda, Brown, Simmons, and Tua. Those are the 5 guys we see most likely at number 3. But if they do move back, I mean, tackle is not out of the question. You got Wirfs, you got Becton. I love Josh Jones's game from Houston. I've got him way too high up in the draft compared to others, but I think he's there. And I think if they trade back, I mean, tackle and interior guard is not out of the question late first round, early second round, because Taylor Decker's on the last year of his deal. Rick Wagner's gone. Graham Glasgow's gone. And they still have a giant hole on the interior of the line because they've replaced Glasgow with Wiggins, who's coming off of a torn bicep. So, there's a lot of holes. I mean, they need receiver depth. It's all over the board. I mean, but I think right behind the defensive needs, it's offensive line and wide receiver. Those are the top behind that.
Right on. And it's interesting that you brought up Tua. We talked about him in our segment before as one of those guys that we're just not sure about. Obviously, the injury that he suffered kind of late in the year. I mean, workout tape shows to be good. Shows that he can be. Looks like he's ready to roll. I mean, how realistic do you think it is for him to be one of the top picks, maybe even within the top 10? And if something happens where he slips, I mean, do you think the Lions would want to take him? Even a lot of fans would argue against that, I think.
Yeah, and I've never been on that Tua train, but it's really important to remember that before his injury, this was the consensus number 1 pick. I mean, as accurate as a quarterback gets, and a left-hander too, so he's got that kind of uniqueness to him that makes him people don't think about that. That's more difficult to defend. That completely flips the defense. I mean, he's got all those things working for him, but that hip injury, the best way it was described to me at the Combine, it wasn't described as a catastrophic sports injury. They're like, this is a traumatic injury you get in like a highway car accident. Like, this is a very, very real injury. And the concerns are real, but I mean, the quarterback talent is there. And I don't think Tua goes past pick 7. I just do not see him slipping. I haven't bought into Herbert over Tua just yet, but yeah, I don't see him slipping past 7. But if the Lions trade back and somehow somebody picks Herbert at 3 or just chaos reigns supreme and Tua's still sitting there at 7, I think he's got so much trade value just in his name alone, even if they don't keep him on the roster. If he's there at 7, I mean, you're looking at a potential move right there because there's more than 2 quarterback needy teams on the board.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. The one just kind of on a random note, the one play that comes to mind when you think about flipping the whole field is that touchdown pass he threw in the national championship game a couple years ago against Georgia. That pump fake and his receiver is wide open because that defending that left-hander is definitely different.
Yeah.
Now, kind of going back to the Lions and looking at their draft as a whole, what are, I guess, some of, and I know you already laid it out a little bit, but what are, I guess, some of your expectations? Offensive heavy, defense heavy. I mean, they'll have quite a few picks. So I guess what are some of your thoughts going into it?
Yeah, and we talked to Bob Quinn on last Friday. We did a little Zoom call like this with Bob Quinn, and he kind of just said we focused on our defense and free agency to try and get those veteran players who are also familiar with our system because we want our defense to be ready on day 1, and there might not be an off-season program. So I really think the first pick is going to be defense because they need one more impact starter. And then I think it's going to lean offense pretty heavily on day 2. I think they're going to grab a receiver or 2. I think they're going to go interior offensive line. People don't want to hear it. A third tight end is not out of the question. A running back isn't out of the question. But I think it starts with wide receiver and interior line at the top of day 2. And then the next pick is going to be whatever they don't grab there because all 3 of their main wide receivers are on the final years of their deal. Jones is off another injury, and Danny Amendola is 35 years old. And there's still some big money on the way for Galladay. So, I mean, I've got them taking 2 receivers in the draft. I think they'll take 2 there, but I think they need a starting guard, and it might have to be a rookie. And you got to go day 2, top of day 2, if you need a starter.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of, again, looking at it as a whole, what do you think is a good – and it's kind of a 2-part question. What do you think would be a successful draft class for the Lions? And then conversely, what do you think would be a disaster draft class?
Yeah, it's a good a successful class is getting either Okuda, Simmons, or Young. If they get one of those three guys, I think they're leaving that draft feeling really, really good. But the perfect draft is you get a starter day 2 at the top of day 2 for the guard, so you can play Big V at tackle. The guy that they paid like a tackle, they're already talking about playing at guard because they have such a hole there. So you need a day 2 interior offensive line starter. You need a fourth option at wide receiver. And if you can pair that with one of those 3 defensive guys, that's a win. Any trade back at this point is a win. It's not going to be 2 first-rounders like people thought. But if this team moves back, gathers more assets, they've already – I think I saw a ranking the other day. They have the 3rd most draft capital already. There's a chance they could have even more. They're not going to top Miami, but any move back for more picks is a win. Now, a loss in my book is taking a quarterback that high, is reaching on an offensive tackle. This team isn't going to get better without another impact starter on defense, and that's what the first pick has to be. Like I'm really high on the need at offensive line and wide receiver, but it's got to be defense first. And if it's not defense first, I've got some major problems with that, and I'll be giving it a bad grade if they reach on a tackle that high or reach on a Tua or a Herbert. You know, I just think they're in a win now year from ownership, and you can't play around. You need an impact starter right away, and I think that's what they're going to do. That's what I expect at least.
Right on. Now, not sure if it's a curveball to you here, but have you done any research on any guys coming out of CMU? Maybe Jonathan Ward or maybe even Devon Jameson. Anybody from CMU that you've been looking at or that maybe could get some looks from NFL?
This one still counts, but he transferred out of CMU. Mike Donna, who went to Michigan last year and kind of didn't really have a productive year at Michigan. You know, that was somebody I kind of caught at the back end of my CMU career. I think he's an NFL pass rusher. I think he needs about 10, 15 pounds. I mean, he was dominant at CMU for those 2 or 3 seasons when he was on the field. Just a specialty pass rusher. If they can get him in the 6th or 7th round, he can carve out a role. He needs to put on some weight, but Mike Donna is a really impressive pass rusher. I liked his work at CMU, and then, you know, he didn't get a ton of reps at Michigan, but when he was on the field, you know, you can see those glimpses of like, oh, there's a really next-level athletic pass rusher in here. But that's and the quarterback, you know, I think he'll get a couple looks as an undrafted. I think he'll get a camp invite. You know, but that's pretty much it for me. That Mike Donna is the top of the top, and I know he wasn't at CMU last year, but you know, he graduated from CMU, so I'll count that one.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're right. I mean, he did make, you know, like you said, he didn't quite get on the field as much as I think he would have hoped to at Michigan.
Yeah.
But he definitely made the most of the reps that he got. I remember maybe it was the Ohio State game. He made a couple of big plays in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Was kind of able to maybe not stick out quite as much, like I said, as he may have wanted to. But I totally agree with you. He definitely could find a big-time role.
And somebody asked me the other day, like, who's the player most hurt by the absence of pro days and, like, the in prospect? It's like I thought of Mike Donna because, like, he didn't have those reps at Michigan. It's like his time to shine was in a pro day, you know, when they're like, wow, this kid's got wheels. Why wasn't he on the field? Oh, because he was at Michigan behind 3 other Vipers. So it's just, you know, it's something like that. He's going to have a tough time getting on boards without those pro days. But that was the name that came to mind a couple of times.
Absolutely. So I guess just my last question for you is, you know, I guess some of your final thoughts. I mean, covering a live sporting event for the first time in what seems like ever. You know, what are some of your guys' I guess final thoughts is on the draft as a whole, and like I said, actually covering something live for once.
Yeah, it's going to be strange. You know, it's going to be strange because I'm at home, and I'd usually be out in Allen Park. You know, you get Bob Quinn, you get Patricia, and then you get the player teleconference right after the pick, and it's like we're all going to be at home, and it's just it's really weird just because, you know, it feels like yesterday we were just at the combine. But, you know, looking forward to some like live actual stuff going on. You know, I've done enough lists in the last couple of weeks to last me a year, so just looking forward to some new stuff to write about. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Ben, thank you so much for your time for joining podcast today. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. It's always great to hear from fellow Chippewas. And folks listening, make sure you check out Benjamin's work on MLive, not just from the draft, but as the season kind of gets presumably as the season starts to roll around, and always make sure you're checking up on your former Chippewas as well. And for Christian and Andy, and for myself, thank you all so much for listening and even watching. Make sure you follow along with us on Twitter at MLive, at MLive Sports. Three of us are pretty easy to find on Twitter. And you can also follow Ben on Twitter at Benjamin S. Raven. Other than that, make sure you always, again, follow along with us on cm-life.com. And we'll talk to you guys again really soon. Thanks, guys.